Welcome back, Maverick Gamers. It's Dwayne here. Today we're going to be talking about some little homebrew rules that I've come up with to make your Dungeons & Dragons shields a little bit more exciting. So I want to start today's video off just talking about something that's kind of near and dear to me as far as growing up in the hobby of Dungeons & Dragons. When I first got my very own Dungeons & Dragons rulebook, or in this case, the box set, I was very enamored by the artwork. In fact, the artwork is what really drew me into getting really excited about Dungeons & Dragons as a hobby and as a game. Now, I actually got the Dungeons & Dragons basic set, which is affectionately referred to as the red box set these days. But on the cover of that box set was art by Larry Elmore. Now, for those of you who don't know, Larry Elmore is a very famous artist within the D&D community, and he is responsible for creating some of the most amazing artwork across all the Dungeons & Dragons, including Dragonlance and others. Now, Larry is retired. He doesn't do any current artwork, but his artwork lives on. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up artwork in this little segment is specifically how it affects me and maybe other gamers like me. I'm a very visual learner, and I'm also very inspired by visual images, comic books, artwork in general, animated shows, things like that. Now, recently, there's a new Larry Elmore in my life. His name is Max Dunbar. And Max is responsible for some of the artwork that you may have seen in some of the Dungeons & Dragons graphic novels. He's also done artwork for Reaper miniatures, and he actually currently is doing comic book artwork as well. Max has been a really great inspiration, and he is basically responsible for kickstarting my new love for Dungeons & Dragons. The reason why I'm bringing that up today is I'm actually using Max's artwork on my thumbnail for this video that you're watching now. So Max, if you're out there listening, thank you for inspiring me, and feel free to shoot me a signed 8x11 custom artwork for myself to hang on my wall. Today, we're going to be talking about shields. Now, shields are quite an interesting topic when it comes to equipment in Dungeons & Dragons. By nature, shields are nothing more than just an extra bonus to your armor class, and that's been the case since Dungeons & Dragons first came out. It was kind of the inevitable question when you ask the player, do you want a shield? Because really, shields were viewed as that extra little buff to your AC. Why wouldn't you take a shield? Now, back in the original Dungeons & Dragons, shields added a +1 to your armor class. Now, in 5th edition, that's now doubled, so shields now represent a +2 buff to your armor class. The only downside to taking shields really is you can't use a two-handed weapon when using a shield. For most fighters and for most combatants, that's not a big issue. I mean, unless you're a big hefty barbarian lugging around a great sword or a great axe, or you're an archer using a bow, why not take a shield, right? Well, recently I started rethinking how shields should be used and maybe adding a little bit more active use from the player when it comes to shields. Let's talk about it. So before we get into shields, I want to talk about action economy in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Action economy is a term that a lot of players use to refer to how many actions you can take in the game and what you can do with those actions. So Dungeons & Dragons action economy currently stands as follows. Players receive one each of the following actions. They have a move action, a standard action, they get a bonus action, and they get a reaction. Now on top of that, they have free actions as well, which is basically the ability to communicate, open doors, things like that. But the gist of it is they have one each of a various different types of actions. The reason why I bring that up is this new shield rule that I'm looking at is going to use one of those actions. What I'm proposing is that shields still get their +2 armor class bonus, but it's now tied to a reaction. So what that means is, if a player is in the middle of combat and decides he wants to use his +2 bonus to his armor class, he can use it as one of his reactions. So if somebody's attacking him, he can say, I want to apply my +2 shield bonus to my armor class for this attack. Using it as a reaction means the player is actually actively blocking the attack. Now, as per rules, if he uses it in that fashion, he can no longer use the shield again in that round. So it becomes a little bit more tactical, and it actually engages the player a little bit more than just having that standardized buff across the board as +2. He actually is going to start thinking, do I want to block this or do I not want to block this? Do I just want to let my armor deal with it or be my nimbleness to dodge out of the way? Or do I want that extra buff in the way of that +2? This gives the player a little bit more involvement in the combat, which is something that I often have trouble with players. It allows the player to actually make decisions during the defensive side of combat, which is typically normally just the monster attacks you, you roll the dice, hey, it beat your armor class, it takes a hit, you take a hit, it didn't beat your armor class, you dodge out of the way or your armor protects you. Adding that active responsibility for the player to say, I want to block with my shield, gets him more involved in a normal side of the combat that would really just be kind of a passive situation for the player. He would just simply sit there and wait for the results to occur. So that is one little tweak that you can do to how shields are handled in your games that might really add a little bit more flavor and a little bit more finesse. Now, one more thing that I want to talk about in regards to shields, and it's not so much a gameplay mechanic as it is flavor. Right now, when you look up shields in the player's handbook, it just simply says shield. Now, I'm not going to introduce anything that's going to sort of micromanage and sort of break down shields into different categories, but I think it's worth noting that a shield is a pretty iconic part of any adventurer's equipment, but it's really kind of remiss to say that all shields are the same. So by standard in the player's handbook, they have just called it a shield, but maybe worthwhile to say to your player, hey, this is another piece of equipment that you can infuse with some flavor and some personality. Whether that shield has an emblem on it, whether that shield is broken, is it a wooden shield? Is it a metal shield? Where did you get this shield? Take the time for players who actually have shields in their equipment to talk to them about what this shield might look like and how they use it and why they use it. After all, I mean, the most iconic shield bearer of all, Captain America, has a history and a story behind his shield, and he actually has a custom look to it. So in the medieval times and the fantasy genre, shields are an opportunity for warriors to add insignias, to fly the banners of their kingdom. So take a moment when your player says, hey, I'm going to buy a shield or I'm going to equip a shield, talk to them about it and see if you can squeeze a little bit of flavor juice out of it. So that's about all I wanted to talk about today. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that you have some ideas about how to use shields. And if you want, leave a comment below and tell me what your ideas in shields and what you think of mine. Hope you're all having fun out there playing Dungeons & Dragons. We'll talk to you soon. Before you go, I need your help. I'm trying to grow the exposure of what we do here at Maverick Games. My goal is to actually bring information to parents and students around the world in hopes that they can see gaming as a path forward for learning, academics, and even support of neurodivergency. Please subscribe. Make sure you click on those notifications, and I hope that you'll find content here that will be helpful for you and maybe others. Thank you very much, and thanks for tuning in.